I've never been one to believe in the supernatural. Ghosts, demons, the things that go bump in the night, all of that seemed like nonsense to me. As a child, I scoffed at ghost stories, laughed at horror movies, and never thought twice about the creaks and groans of an old house. But now, at 26, I'm not so sure. I never believed in ghosts, but something is haunting me. Something that feeds on fear, something ancient, something malevolent. The Hollow Ones. I moved into this apartment 3 months ago. It's an old building, the kind you find in cities that have been around too long, where history seems to seep into the walls. The rent was dirt cheap, suspiciously so for the neighborhood, but I didn't care. It was close to work, and I was tired of roommates. The apartment itself wasn't much to look at. Cracked plaster, water stains on the ceiling, floorboards that creaked with every step, but it was mine, or so I thought. The first night I noticed something strange. As I lay in bed, the city's usual noise, a distant hum of traffic, the occasional shout, seemed to fade, replaced by a stillness so profound it was suffocating. And then I heard it. A faint whisper, barely audible, coming from the walls. It was so soft that I thought it was my imagination, just the building settling or the wind outside. But the whisper persisted, growing louder each night. I told myself it was just the pipes. Old buildings make strange noises after all, but it didn't sound like pipes. It sounded like someone, or something, was trying to speak, trying to get inside my head. The words were garbled, unintelligible, but they carried a weight, a menace that set my teeth on edge. It felt like the walls were closing in, pressing down on me, suffocating me with their secrets. I tried to ignore it, to rationalize it away, but the whispering didn't stop. It followed me through the apartment, growing louder in the dead of night. I started to notice other things too, shadows that didn't belong, cold spots that made my skin prickle with dread. Sometimes I would catch a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a figure standing in the hallway, a dark silhouette just beyond the edge of my vision. But whenever I turned to look, there was nothing there. Then the dreams started. Vivid, twisted nightmares that left me gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. In the dreams, I was never alone. I was always being watched, pursued by something I couldn't see, something that wanted to drag me down into the dark. I would wake up in a cold sweat, the whispering louder than ever, filling my head with dark thoughts, thoughts that weren't mine. I tried to stay out of the apartment as much as possible, but I could feel its pull, dragging me back. The building had a history, a dark one. I found that out when I started digging, desperate to understand what was happening to me. The building had been constructed in the late 1800s, and it had seen more than its fair share of death. There had been a fire, a bad one, that had killed several people. The top floors had burned, trapping the tenants inside, their screams echoing through the night as they were consumed by the flames. But that wasn't the worst of it. There were other deaths too. Murders, suicides, disappearances that were never explained. The building had a reputation for driving people mad, for sucking the life out of its residents until they were hollowed out, empty husks of their former selves. The locals called it the Hollow Place. No one stayed there long. They either left or died. I should have left, but something kept me there. I became obsessed with the history of the building, with the lives that had been lost within its walls. I spent hours at the library, poring over old newspapers, searching for answers. I learned that the building had been constructed on the site of an old asylum, long since torn down. The asylum had been notorious for its cruel and inhumane treatments. The patients had been tortured, experimented on, driven to madness by the very people who were supposed to help them. The whispers in the walls grew louder, more insistent, and with them came the visions. I started seeing things, horrible, twisted things that couldn't be real, bloodstains that appeared and disappeared, faces in the mirror that weren't my own, hands reaching out of the darkness to drag me down. I tried to tell myself it was stress, that I was imagining things, but deep down I knew I wasn't alone. The night I finally saw her, really saw her, was the night everything changed. I'd been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to close my eyes. The whispers had reached a fever pitch, a cacophony of voices that seemed to be coming from all around me. And then she appeared. She stood at the foot of my bed, a tall, emaciated figure draped in tattered rags, her skin a sickly gray, stretched tight over her bones. Her hair hung in matted clumps around her face, and her eyes were black pits, empty voids that seemed to suck the light from the room. Her mouth hung open, a dark hole filled with jagged teeth, blood and bile dripping from her cracked lips. I was paralyzed, unable to move, unable to scream. I could only watch as she reached out with long, bony fingers, her nails sharp and filthy, scratching at the air as she drew closer. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, of rotting flesh and burnt hair. I gagged, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. She climbed onto the bed, her weight pressing down on me, her face inches from mine. I could feel her breath on my skin, cold and fetid. Her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile, and she leaned in, her voice a rasping whisper that filled my head, drowning out all other thoughts. "They hollowed us out," she said, her voice a chorus of agony. "They took everything, now it's your turn." Her hand closed around my throat, her grip impossibly strong, her nails digging into my flesh. I struggled, but it was like trying to fight off a nightmare. No matter how hard I fought, I couldn't break free. She squeezed tighter, her eyes boring into mine, and I felt something cold and dark seep into me, spreading through my veins like poison. Then she was gone. I was left gasping for breath, my throat raw, my skin cold and clammy. I scrambled out of bed, my body shaking uncontrollably. I could still feel her touch, the lingering cold of her presence, the weight of her gaze. I knew she wasn't gone. Not really. She was inside me, in my head, in my soul. The following days were a blur. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, felt her touch. The whispers never stopped, growing louder and more insistent, filling my mind with dark thoughts. I started losing time, finding myself in places I didn't remember going, covered in cuts and bruises I couldn't explain. I wasn't alone. There were others, shadows that moved on their own, shapes that flitted through the corners of my vision. I could feel them watching me, waiting. And then the dreams became worse, twisted visions of the asylum, of the patients being tortured, their screams echoing through the halls. But they weren't just dreams. I could feel their pain, their fear, their hopelessness. It was like I was reliving their deaths over and over again. I had to get out. I packed a bag, ready to leave everything behind. But when I reached the door, I couldn't open it. My hands wouldn't move, my feet wouldn't take me forward. It was as if the building itself was holding me there, trapping me within its walls. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I was frozen, paralyzed by fear and something else, something dark and ancient that had taken root in my soul. Then I saw her again. This time she wasn't alone. The room was filled with them, twisted, broken figures, their bodies contorted in unnatural ways, their faces hollow and empty. They surrounded me, closing in, their whispers rising to a deafening roar. I could feel their hands on me, cold and dead, pulling me down, dragging me into the darkness, but something inside me fought back. I don't know where the strength came from, but I screamed. A sound ripped from my throat, raw and primal. It was a sound of defiance, of desperation. It cut through the darkness, through the whispers, through the cold. I felt the air shift, the pressure around me easing. The figures recoiled, their hollow eyes widening in shock. The woman at the center of it all, her hand still reaching for me, let out a wail, a sound that chilled my blood, but she didn't stop me. I could feel her anger, her frustration, but she couldn't stop me. Not now. I turned and ran, tearing through the apartment, throwing open the door with a strength I didn't know I had. I didn't look back as I fled down the hallway, down the stairs, out into the cold night air. I kept running until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out beneath me and I collapsed on the pavement, gasping for breath. The cold night air hit my skin like a slap, but it was a relief, a reminder that I was still alive, still in control. I looked back at the building, its dark silhouette looming against the night sky. It seemed to pulsate with malevolent energy, as if it were alive, watching me, waiting for me to come back. I could still feel its pull, that insidious whisper in the back of my mind, urging me to return, to give in. But I knew if I went back, I would never leave again. I had escaped, but the shadows of that place still clung to me. I could feel them, a lingering presence just at the edge of my awareness. The whispers were gone, but the memory of them remained, etched into my mind like a scar. I knew I would never be the same again. I spent the next few nights in a cheap motel on the other side of town, too afraid to sleep, too terrified to close my eyes. The dreams still came, but they were different now, less vivid, less overwhelming. I could still see her face, still feel her touch, but the power she had over me was fading. Each day, the fear lessened, but it never truly went away. I reached out to a local historian, a man who had dedicated his life to uncovering the dark history of the city. I told him everything, sparing no detail, and he listened with a grave expression, as if he had heard it all before. He confirmed what I had suspected. The building was cursed, tainted by the suffering of the past, by the souls that had been trapped there. "They won't let you go easily," he said, his voice a low murmur. "You've left the building, but they'll follow you. The Hollow Ones don't give up what they've claimed." I felt a chill run down my spine. Is there any way to get rid of them? To break the curse? He hesitated, then shook his head. "There are rituals, ancient practices that might help, but they're dangerous and there's no guarantee they'll work. The best thing you can do is stay away. Leave the city, put as much distance between you and that place as possible." I took his advice. I left the city, moved across the country, far away from the Hollow Place and its dark legacy. I found a new apartment, in a building that was bright and new, with no history, no lingering shadows, but the memories stayed with me, and every so often I still hear a faint whisper in the quiet moments, a soft voice at the edge of my consciousness, reminding me that the darkness is never truly gone. I've started a new life, but I know I'll never be free. The Hollow Ones are a part of me now, a shadow in my soul that I can't escape, but I'm determined to live, to fight, to hold on to the light for as long as I can. I won't let them take me, not like they took the others, because no matter how deep the darkness, there's always a spark of light. And as long as that spark remains, I'll keep fighting, keep living, and never let them hollow me out.